I took the Kolyma courier escort because the clinic shipment was time-sensitive and the dispatcher wanted a responsible person with a sat beacon. I packed spare gloves, lithium batteries, and a paper route sheet, and my plan was to ride with a driver across one river ice crossing, hand off the cooler at the outpost, and ride back before the next storm band. I went because my boss guilt-tripped me, and I hate being called useless. I kept tapping the beacon like it was a lucky charm. You don't really volunteer for shit like that out here. You get told it's urgent. You get told there are people waiting. You get told the road is fine because somebody's cousin drove it yesterday. And then you look at your bank app and remember you're replaceable. I'm not a medic. I'm the guy who signs for boxes, checks seal numbers, and gets screamed at when the generator fuel invoice doesn't match. Like that's a fucking crime. But when they need a body to babysit a clinic cooler and hit SOS if the truck goes under, suddenly I'm responsible. The cooler was thick plastic, taped shut, with a frozen paper label that said clinic and nothing else. No one told me what was inside. They never do. They just say don't let it freeze, like that's a choice at -30. I wedged it behind the seats so it wouldn't launch into us if we hit ruts. I wrote the seal numbers down with a pen that barely worked because ink turns to syrup in the cold. I checked the beacon, checked the spare batteries, checked it again. The green light blinked like a little heartbeat I didn't trust. The driver rolled up late in a battered flatbed with chains clanking under the frame. Mid-50s, maybe, face cracked from wind, hands like rope. He didn't introduce himself. He looked at me, looked at the cooler, and asked if I was the babysitter. He laughed like that settled the hierarchy. I didn't laugh. I climbed in because arguing in the depot yard at 6 a.m. felt like suicide by paperwork. The cab stank of cigarettes and diesel and wet wool. He had icons taped to the dash and an empty vodka mini rolling in the door pocket. He kept the heater low like suffering was a badge. My breath still smoked in the beam of the dash light. I sat with the route sheet on my knee like it mattered, even though the whole job was one line. Depot, river, outpost, back. One crossing. That was the promise I sold myself. People online talk about ice roads like there's some badass right. In real life, it's a stupid agreement you make with physics because there's no other way. The first 10 meters onto ice always feels like stepping onto a glass table. Your brain runs a little movie of you in black water, door jammed, lungs burning, hands useless. I try not to run that movie. I tap the beacon instead. Tap, 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 like the plastic could ward off cold water. The river crossing looked solid until we hit the middle. The road surface changed from hard crunch to a wet squeal. The truck's rear fishtailed a few inches and the driver corrected too hard, angry, jerking the wheel like he could bully physics. A crack ran under us with a sound I felt in my teeth. The ice didn't explode. It spoke, one long groan. Then a second crack branched out, racing the headlight beams. Water seeped up through seams and flashed black. I told the driver to keep speed steady. He argued, swore, started braking anyway. Braking on thin ice is how you die. You lose momentum, you sit longer on the weak spot, the weight does the math, and then you're suddenly lower than you were. I reached over, grabbed his wrist, and held the throttle with my other hand like we were wrestling for our lives. The truck lurched forward. The cooler behind the seats slammed into the cab wall. The driver tried to shove me off, face red, pride over survival. He twisted hard, trying to rip his hand free. I held on, not brave, just locked in. Like if I let go, everything would happen and it would be my fault for watching it happen. He yelled in my ear, spit cold on my cheek. His eyes weren't on the road anymore. They were on me, on winning. The ice dropped an inch under the front axle. That tiny drop snapped something in my head. I pictured the truck settling, doors freezing, water climbing the floor in slow, absolute steps. I didn't negotiate anymore. I punched him. One clean hit. He sagged back and the truck kept rolling. His head bounced off the window. The steering wheel wobbled in his hands. For a stupid second, I thought we'd flip and the river wouldn't even have to work for it. I grabbed the wheel with my left hand, kept my right planted on the throttle, and held the line straight. Under us, the sounds kept changing. Crunch, squeal, then a sharp pop like a rifle shot. The truck bounced. Water shone in the headlight spill right under the lane, not on the sides like the road was sweating. My mouth went dry. My tongue stuck to my teeth. The beacon dug into my thigh because I'd been squeezing it without realizing. The driver came back in jerks, coughing, and his hand went straight for the brake again, pure reflex. I slapped it away. He grabbed my sleeve and tried to haul me off the gas. I drove my elbow into his chest just to make space. He made this ugly wheeze and then stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. The far bank looked close, and then it didn't. Ice plays tricks with distance. Everything is flat and white, and your brain has nothing to measure. I kept my eyes on the snow berm where the road climbed back to land and told myself one dumb rule. Get the front tires on dirt, and we're not in the river. We rolled, slow and steady, the truck shaking like it didn't want to be there. Then the front tires hit the berm, and the whole cab changed tone. Solid. Real. The truck climbed out. The ice stopped talking. We cleared the far bank, and I pulled off, shaking so hard I couldn't unclip my seatbelt. My fingers fumbled the latch like they weren't mine. The driver spat blood into his palm and stared at me like I'd betrayed him. I didn't apologize. I'd rather be hated than sunk. He said something nasty, low, about what he'd do to me if we weren't in the middle of nowhere. Then he climbed out and pissed in the snow like that proved he still owned the world. I sat there and listened to the engine idle and tried to stop hearing the river groan in my teeth. We drove the rest of the way to the outpost in silence. Every rut made my stomach drop. Every time the suspension settled, I braced for water. The outpost was a few buildings crouched in the white. A generator shed, a radio mast, a clinic hut with a faded red cross. A couple dogs watched us from under a stair, too tired to bark. Smoke rose straight up the air so still it felt fake. A nurse met us at the door with her collar up and her eyes already tired. She didn't ask about the crossing. Nobody here asks. I dragged the cooler inside, set it on a table, and checked the seals like a ritual. At the outpost, I checked the shipment. The cooler was intact. The beacon still worked. My hands wouldn't warm up though. The clinic room smelled like disinfectant and wet boots. A space heater pushed lukewarm air that did nothing. I rubbed my hands until my palms went numb. The nurse offered tea. I almost took it, then I pictured the driver outside stewing, and I didn't want anyone comfort, so I shook my head. I signed the handoff with a pin chained to the desk. The chain rattled, and the sound made me flinch. Back in the cab, the driver wouldn't look at me. He lit another cigarette with hands that still shook, like he hated that fear had shown up on him too. On the ride back, he drove too fast out of spite, taking corners like the road had insulted him. I bit my tongue until I tasted blood because picking another fight on that ice felt like begging to die. When the depot lights finally showed through the snow, I felt relief hit me so hard it made me dizzy, and then it turned into anger, hot and useless. They would call it normal run. They would send somebody else tomorrow. The river would keep eating whatever it wanted. I went straight to the washroom, turned on the tap, and stared at the stream like it was proof the world could be contained. My hands still burned and didn't burn at the same time, like the nerves were waking up and screaming about it. I scrubbed fast, nails against soap, until the water ran clear and my skin went pink. It should have been enough. I've been in the cab the whole time dry, just fierce sweat and cigarette stink. But the sink smelled faintly like river algae for a second, like somebody had dumped a bucket of silt in it. And I actually looked around like I'd see a footprint. I rinsed again, harder, and the grit feeling stayed under the nails like it had packed itself there. I peeled my glove off slow because the fabric had frozen stiff around my fingers. The inside was damp from sweat, and it felt wrong, like pulling skin off something dead. When I finally peeled my glove off, my knuckles were scraped raw, and there was a thin line of black silt under my nails like I'd been digging in riverbed mud. I hadn't touched the water. Not once. I agreed to service a dead radio repeater off the Kolyma because the tower feeds winter traffic warnings and the company hates liability. I packed batteries, a crimp tool, and a handheld radio, and my plan was to swap the power unit, run a signal test, and sleep one night in a heated shack near an old settlement. I went with a driver who'd drop me and leave, because waiting costs fuel. I stuffed a candy bar in my pocket, and it turned into a brick. My boss called it easy, like that word does anything out there. I pushed back about timing and got the usual crap. The road department was already asking why warnings were out. Insurance people were sniffing around, and if somebody slid into a ditch because the repeater stayed dead, our company would be the villain on paper. So I did what I always do when people upstairs get scared: overpacked and shut up. Spare fuses, heat packs, a second set of connectors, a coil of telecom wire from the shop spool because the last guy on this route loved cutting corners. The driver showed up with that energy like he hated everyone for existing. He watched me load my bag and kept muttering fuel, like if he repeated it enough, it would excuse anything. When I mentioned staying near the tower overnight, he looked at me like I was trying to trap him. He said he'd drop me, go back to the main road, and return at gray morning if the track didn't drift over. The turnoff came late because he refused to leave earlier. The track into the settlement wasn't plowed. The truck fishtailed twice, and I grabbed the dash so hard my fingers cramped. He slowed as the first buildings showed up, staring straight ahead, jaw working. He didn't like the place. He stopped beside the shack, tossed my bag out like it was garbage, and told me to be quick. The taillights vanished before I could even decide whether to yell. The settlement wasn't ruins like a movie. It was leftovers, sagging barracks, busted trucks half sunk in permafrost, empty windows that looked like open mouths. The shack door stuck, then opened with a cough of dust and cold. Inside, someone had been there recently. Not living, using. Fresh cigarette butts. A blue tarp. A pile of human bones on a sheet, like someone sorted them by size. I didn't think bones. I knew bones. A pelvis isn't a deer. The horror hit late, like my brain tried to protect itself and failed. My light jittered because my hand started shaking. The pile wasn't random. Long bones on one side, smaller ones on the other, like somebody was organizing parts. A jaw sat near the tarp, teeth missing in a way that looked chosen, not age. A couple ends looked clean cut, not snapped. There was a cooking pot by the stove with a crust ring inside, and I had this sick thought: don't imagine what boiled in it. Under the table sat stacked cans, a torn glove, and more blue tarp folded like it mattered. Whoever did this didn't do it in a rush. I backed out and sucked air through my teeth, trying not to make noise. I told myself, do the job, get out. I turned toward the tower, because work is a leash you can grab when your brain wants to run. My radio crackled and a voice came through, calm, telling me to stay put because the road gets dangerous at night. The repeater I came to fix was dead. That voice wasn't possible. I hated that I almost listened. I checked the handheld without thinking, thumbed the buttons, stared at the frequency readout like it would explain itself. Maintenance channel. The voice came again, same cadence, like a bulletin, and it knew where I was, said in the shack, even though I'd already stepped out. I tried to transmit a quick call sign, just to prove there was a person on the other end, and the radio answered with a burst of static that sounded almost like laughing if you were already losing your mind. I walked anyway because standing still felt like obeying. I aimed my light at the snow and my stomach tightened. My footprints from earlier were there, crisp, and inside them were other prints, smaller, pressed perfectly into mine. Someone had followed me by stepping where I stepped to hide their trail. I looked back at the shack window, and the glass threw my headlamp back at me. So for a second, it looked like eyes. I forced myself to scan corners, gaps between buildings, dark under truck frames. Nothing. Nothing means they're good at it. At the tower base, I found the service cabinet half buried in drifted snow. The padlock was gone. Not broken, cut clean. The power unit inside was missing, wires hanging like dead veins, and stripped and twisted together with telecom wire, tight and neat. My stomach sank. This wasn't a dead repeater. This was staged. Fucking staged. I pulled my phone anyway, out of habit, and got the dead screen and the little battery icon like a joke. I thumbed the radio again, tried to reach the driver, and the only answer was that calm voice telling me to stay put, like it owned the night. I walked to the track where the truck had been and saw the tire ruts already softening under wind, already filling in. He wasn't circling back. He was gone. I grabbed the ladder because ladders are simple and simple keeps you alive. The metal was so cold it grabbed my gloves, and every rung stuck for a heartbeat before letting go. 10 feet up, I heard a thud and felt it in my teeth. A rock hit the tower leg near my head and rang like a bell. I flinched and almost lost my grip. Another rock hit lower, measured like someone was sighting me. I killed my headlamp and clung there in the dark. The radio hissed in my pocket, then clicked like someone keying a mic. The calm voice came back and told me the tower was unsafe and I should come down and wait in the shack. It felt like it cared. It didn't. It wanted me where the bones were. I tried to look down without moving much. I couldn't see a person, but I saw where the rocks came from, a small pile at the base, stacked like ammo. That was when it hit me. This wasn't to knock me off. They were hurting me. Up, down, up, down. A game. I climbed higher until my headlamp caught the narrow platform where you can clip in a rusted ring and an old safety strap stiff as wood. I jammed my glove through it anyway and leaned my weight into the ladder, trying to make a fall impossible. Below me, another rock hit, then another, spaced out like a heartbeat. Once I heard a soft crunch in the snow that wasn't wind, right under the tower, and I held my breath so hard my chest hurt. My hands started to go numb and then to ache deep like the pain lived inside the bone. I wrapped my forearm through the ladder and locked myself in place. Every few minutes another rock would hit. Never my hands, never my face. Always the steel, always close, always a reminder, come down. I thought about jumping and sprinting, but sprinting where? Past the shack, into those buildings, into snow with no trail except the one they were already wearing like a mask. I kept picturing that tarp and the sorted bones, like my brain was trying to force me back inside to make the fear real. I caught myself turning toward the shack once, then I stopped. I'd rather freeze on steel than stand in that room again. The radio clicked like someone was smiling with their finger on the button. I stayed there while the sky crawled toward gray. Time turned into little bursts. Listen, breathe, flex fingers, swallow nothing. In the half-light, I saw a movement near the shack window, not a full body, just a shift behind the glass like somebody leaning in to watch. The radio clicked again, and the voice still didn't speak. Just static. My mind kept trying to bargain. Fix it fast and leave. There was nothing to fix. Call the driver. No signal. Call the company. They tell me to use safety protocol, like protocol can stop a rock from finding your skull. I got angry enough to feel warm for a second, angry at the driver, at my boss, at myself for stepping into this like a trained dog. Then the cold would bite again and strip the anger back to raw fear. When the gray finally showed up for real, the rocks stopped. Not because they were done, but because daylight changes the game. I held on another hour anyway, because I couldn't trust it. My legs trembled so hard the ladder shook. Then I heard an engine. The truck came back, slow and cautious. The driver didn't get out. He kept the door cracked, yelled at me to hurry, and refused to look at the settlement. I climbed down on legs that felt wrong, stumbled to the cab, and threw my bag inside. He gunned it the second the door shut. We bounced away, and he still didn't ask why my hand shook. He just kept driving like silence was protection. In the truck, heat hit my face and made me dizzy. My fingers lit up with pins and needles as feeling came back. It hurt so bad I bit the inside of my cheek. I opened my bag to check my tools. My crimp tool was gone. In its place sat a single tooth wrapped in blue tarp plastic, tied off with telecom wire, my wire. I took the Kolyma inspection run because the contractor paid double if you drove it in one day and filed photos before midnight. I packed a thermal suit, a flare kit, and a dash cam, and my plan was to check 3 culverts and an ice road marker line. then turned back to the last heated post. I went alone because nobody volunteers for row to bone shifts. I kept a metal thermos in the cup holder, and it kept freezing shut between sips. That road isn't pretty remote. It's empty in a way that makes you forget you're a person. The SUV groaned like it hated being awake. The heater fought, lost, fought again. I watched the outside temp sit at -40 and try not to think about what happens if you stall. Out there, quiet is what kills you. I'd already done one culvert stop, and my hands still stung under my gloves from handling the metal tape. The photos looked fine on the dash screen, little bright squares of snow and pipe and marker stakes. The kind of proof you send so someone in a warm office can say approved and never picture your knees in a snowbank. I was pushing the clock, but I wasn't reckless yet. I was still in that dumb, I'm professional mode, checking my list, checking my fuel, checking the radio, even though it only spat static and distant voices. 2 hours in, I saw a man on the shoulder, one arm up, no car, no tracks leading anywhere. -40 makes you stupid compassionate. It also makes you want to believe your eyes because you're bored and your brain needs something. I eased off the gas and stared for the usual clues. Broken plastic in the snow, a dark smudge where a vehicle slid, anything. There was nothing. The wind hadn't even piled a drift around him. He stood on clean hardpack like it was a platform. My first thought was to keep going. My second thought was my own mother hammering into me that you don't leave people in the cold. That second thought is how people end up on missing person posters. I stopped 10 meters ahead, kept the engine running, cracked the passenger door. I didn't even open it wide. I wanted distance, a gap I could slam shut. He moved too fast for that cold, slipped in, and brought a stink of sweat trapped in old wool. The smell made no sense. People out there don't smell like that unless they've been warm recently, or they've been working hard, or they've been freaking out. He didn't ask for a lift. He didn't say thanks. He didn't even look at my face first. He sat down and started scanning my cab. Radio, sat phone, tool roll, flare case, the dash cam mount. His eyes did quick stops like he was checking a list. His hands were bare. No mitens, no cracked skin. Just hands, red at the knuckles like he'd scrubbed them. I reached for the lock switch without making it obvious and hit it. The little click sounded too loud. He looked at the door for half a second, then back to the console like he'd heard it and filed it away. I told him the next post was behind me and he should get out. I tried to sound firm. It came out thin. He smiled like I'd made him a deal. Not friendly, just this flat, sure smile, like he was listening to a voice in his head that was telling him he was right. His hand went down between the seats where my tire iron sat. I saw his fingers curl around it and the whole helping someone fantasy snapped. I reached for it too, but he already had it half up, testing the weight like he was deciding where to swing. His other hand drifted toward my sat phone cradle. He tapped the cradle once with his knuckle, like he was confirming it was real, then his gaze flicked to the dash cam. He didn't touch it yet, but I saw him clock it. That made my skin crawl. I jammed the SUV into gear and floored it while his body wasn't braced. The tires spun, grabbed, and he slammed into the dash hard enough to knock his breath out. He swore and lunged for my wheel. His hand hit it and tried to yank it left. I didn't have room to think. I drove my elbow into his throat. I felt cartilage crunch. He made this wet choking sound and spat on my sleeve. His eyes watered, but he didn't fold. He hooked my jacket instead, fist closing on my collar and pulling, trying to drag me toward him like he wanted my head in his lap. I fought his grip with one hand and kept the SUV straight with the other. I could hear fabric tearing near my shoulder. He kept tugging like a machine, no panic, just effort, like he'd done this in a moving cab before and knew exactly how much force it took to unseat someone. I kicked at his shin with my boot and felt it connect, but he barely reacted. I swung the SUV into a snow berm hard enough to throw him sideways. The impact jerked my spine. Snow dust blasted through the vents. The tire iron clanged down in the passenger footwell. For a split second, his grip loosened and I yanked my jacket free. But he recovered fast, face twisted, still trying to breathe right. He ripped at my door handle, trying to bail. The lock caught. He slapped it again, harder, like he was angry at the car, not me. I hit the brakes, and the SUV skidded, stopped. I popped my own door and rolled out before he could reset. Cold punched my lungs so hard I almost puked. I ran around the hood with the flare like it was a weapon because it was the only thing I had that kept distance. My hand shook so bad I fumbled the cap. I got it lit anyway, and the red hiss filled my ears. He crawled out the passenger side and didn't run away. He stood there, shoulders twitching from the cold or from the hit, and he smiled again, like this was familiar. I looked for tracks then, finally, because my brain couldn't accept it. Behind him, his shoulder was smooth, just wind-scraped snow. No prints leading in, no prints leading out. I pointed the flare at him and backed up, keeping the SUV between us. He didn't charge, but he didn't leave. He took one slow step forward, then another, eyes locked on me, like he wanted me to blink first. I could feel my fingers starting to lose fine control, even inside gloves. The cold was a timer, and he knew it. I fired the flare at his feet. The snow flashed red and spit sparks. He flinched just long enough for me to sprint back to my door, slam it, and punch the gas. The SUV fishtailed, caught, and took off down the ice. In the mirror, he stayed on the road, shrinking slow, still waving, like he expected me to come back. I kept staring until my eyes hurt, waiting for him to drop the act and sprint, or for another figure to step out, or for headlights to bloom behind him. Nothing, just the wave, steady, patient. I tried the sat phone with one hand while I drove, thumb stabbing buttons. It took forever to wake up in that cold, and then it threw a weak signal icon that vanished again. I got one half-formed call attempt and it died. The rest of the drive felt wrong. Every shadow between trees looked like a person. Every bump sounded like a door opening. I kept checking the passenger side mirror like he might be running beside me in the dark. I didn't stop again. I didn't take the next photos. I drove straight to the heated post, tires humming, knuckles locked. At the post, I parked crooked and stumbled inside. The guy on duty looked up, and I forced out the basic pieces: man, road, hands on the wheel, while he watched me like he was deciding whether I was about to make his night harder. He told me, blunt, that if I'd stopped for a stranger out there, then that was on me. That lit something in my chest. I snapped back that I didn't stop for fun. I stopped because people freeze. He just shrugged like freezing was a personality flaw. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. I needed proof, not his opinion. I went back out and checked my cab for stolen gear like my brain needed a task to survive. It's that phone there, tools there, flare kit, -1, tire iron there, but it sat too neat, too centered like someone had placed it. I grabbed the dash cam and popped the card out so I could lock it away, so I could prove I wasn't crazy. The slot was empty. I stared at it and then tore through the glove box, the console, under the mats, the door pockets. Nothing. I hadn't pulled it earlier. I hadn't even touched the camera since I left town. There was no way it just fell out. I stood there with my head in the cab, breathing hard, and I realized he'd had time. When he slid in fast, when he scanned, when my eyes went to his hand on the tire iron. He didn't need the car. He wanted the card. He wanted the one thing that would make him real to someone else. I felt this stupid urge to march back inside and demand the duty guy call it in, like a phone call could pull reality back into place. But without that card, it was just my word, and my word started sounding shaky even to me. That's what he bought with 10 seconds in my cab. My proof, my leverage, my sanity. I stood there listening to the engine tick and the wind scrape the body panels, waiting for footsteps. Then I saw in the passenger footwell a strip of cloth from his sleeve tied in a tight, neat knot around my tire iron like a tag.